when you have the good games. And so you just go back to your process and take it one day at a time, believe that over the long haul, good things will happen and you're going to play better football more often than you're not. But, that's where my focus is now on Wednesday.
That is Kirk Cousins, having gone back and watched the film of this last week. And hopefully he'll provide a more inspired performance against the Titans, or maybe not. Maybe we want the Vikings to keep losing so they can draft, I don't know, they can tank for
I'm
Trevor
comfortable with whatever happens.
But welcome into Purple Daily. I am Phil Mackey. That is Judd Zolgad. We've got Declan Goff producing. We'll get to our guest here in just a second. A couple quick shout outs. Number one, we will, in this episode, talk about the future of Mike Zimmer and whether, even though he signed a contract extension, whether his future should be in immediate trouble if this continues to train wreck. But every Thursday, we look to the opposing team and we talk to somebody with much more knowledge about that opposing team than we have, powered by Corona Hard Seltzer. Turron Davenport from ESPN.com. He is the Titans reporter. Thanks for coming on Purple Daily with us, Turron.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We just want to ask you like 15 minutes of Steven Gostkowski questions. So fire up. So the Titans have gone 9-7, 4 consecutive years. And it kind of feels a little bit like where the Vikings have been at in their franchise, where they're good, not great. There's another level to get to. How is, after this 2-0 start, how are people viewing the Titans, and how are people viewing their chances to finally break through the plateau of 9-7 and maybe even get to a Super Bowl?
This is the best 2-0 start that the Titans could have because they're not convincing wins. So yeah, they're 2-0, but it's very easy to keep just that mindset, that blue collar mindset, because let's face the facts. Jacksonville put up 480 yards of total offense on them last week. So there are things to be concerned about, even though they're winning. Derrick Henry is not running the football as explosively as he normally does. So people are saying, hey, we got to get the rushing game going. Arthur Smith is saying that. Henry's saying that. The offensive linemen are saying that. So even though they're 2-0, like the Chiefs and like the Ravens and the Bills, it's a different 2-0 because they're keeping their mindset still on that grinder, just have to get better type of vibe.
So through 2 games, would you say that there is concern about how the team has looked, or does this feel like it's still a pretty good team that's just off to no preseason games, weird training camp, and it's to a certain point shaking off the rust and on the track to be pretty darn good again?
I think that's really what it is, shaking off the rust and getting back on track. And you have to remember there are some new parts that are being, fluxed into the defense, especially, right, with Jadeveon Clowney and then Vic Beasley. Whenever he should get onto the field, that's a different situation that we could talk about. But there are some things that have to happen in order for them to get back to that quote-unquote Titans football that they trademarked last year. And even just under Mike Vrabel, right? You always look at the running game. You see Derrick Henry, he stretches it, puts his foot in the ground, gets upfield, and next thing you know, it's a 60-yard touchdown. You're not seeing that this year so far, but it's more of a methodical attack. At the same time, you have to understand Derrick Henry is a guy that typically gets going later in the year. So there's a lot going on. If you want to look at a bright spot, though, Ryan Tannehill is spreading the football around pretty evenly, and that's without having A.J. Brown on the team. They're kind of becoming like the Denver Nuggets, where you got 20 guys that could score 5 guys that could score 20 points, but you don't really have that guy that's going to average 30, but it's just harder to stop them because you can't stop everybody at once.
Yeah, Tannehill is such an interesting case study here in that people have the 6 years of what he looked like in Miami ingrained in their heads, and so even like with the contract discussions in the offseason, everyone's kind of like, I don't know, man, like one good year, he's in his early 30s. But if you were to just tell me, like, strip away the 6 years of Miami and the bad infrastructure and everything, the injury, if you said, all right, I got a guy who was a dominant college quarterback, he was the 8th overall pick, and in his first 14 games, like you've seen with the Titans, he's going to throw 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, lead the NFL in traditional passer rating. He's going to be ranked in the top 8 in QBR, and yards per attempt, he'll be number 1. You'd say, oh yeah, okay, he's a star. I mean, has he emerged officially into this new level, or is there still in your mind some doubt over whether this is the real Ryan Tannehill?
I personally believe this is the Ryan Tannehill that you're going to get. And for me, when I look at it, it kind of takes me back to my playing days where we had our coach, our wide receiver coach, Coach Frankie Sumter, rest in peace. But if you did something cowardly on the football field, he'll say, somebody needs to take him to the wizard to get some heart. You know, and that's what Tannehill did. He went to the wizard and got some heart. And you see the way he's playing just with such a confident mindset. That throw, if you guys saw the Jaguars game, the 18-yard touchdown to Adam Humphries, just staring down Josh Allen and still making that throw, getting up and saying, and one. Like, that's just, it's a different swagger with him. And I think that throw was really the perfect example of how he's come along. So, yeah, I'm convinced that he's a solid quarterback. He's just different than he was in Miami. He's willing to push the ball down the field. He's not a check down guy anymore. Doesn't only take the safe throws inside the hashes. So, I think he's at a star level for sure.
So at a position that's so tough to fill and teams are continually trying to look and find guys at that spot, what can be learned about him then from what the Dolphins did wrong to what has worked here? Because, I mean, clearly now in retrospect, the Dolphins whiffed in many ways, not in taking him, but not developing him. What's the cautionary tale, or what's the story here in your mind that we're beginning to see in Tannehill's career as he now tracks from being what I think was probably considered a bust for a while into a really good quarterback?
I think really it's just like any other relationship. You have to pick the right partner. That's really what it boils down to. And look, Adam Gase wasn't the right partner for Ryan Tannehill. Now, initially he was in a good spot. His OC from Texas A&M was the OC when he first got to Miami. But it really boils down to just having the right partner. And that's something that I remember last year asking him about what it is that has changed. And he always said Arthur Smith and how willing he is. He said that Arthur Smith is the OC for the Titans, is the most cooperative and open play caller he's ever had. And a good example of that, just to give you a little behind the scenes, the touchdown against the Ravens, the play action, it was the second touchdown to put them up 14-0. They're on the right hash. Tannehill came over to Arthur Smith, and Arthur Smith gave him the play. And he said, you know what, I'm not really feeling that play. I think this one would be better. And Arthur Smith was like, yeah, let's run that. And sure enough, it was the touchdown. So that's an example of just the relationship. There's no egos, right? A lot of offensive coordinators are like, man, who do you think you are telling me what I'm the OC, I call the plays. No, it was, you know what, that's a good point. And I think that's really an example of why things are going right for Tannehill. And then just the confidence that he has. Everybody at the NFL level has plenty of ability, but a lot of the separation between, you know, a player X and player A is here. And he's playing with so much more confidence and so much more decisive with the football. You're seeing the results. That's why it's such an evenly distributed passing game.
And Mike Vrabel is the one that ultimately sets this culture, third year as the coach in Tennessee. And even though he's not officially a member of the Bill Belichick coaching tree, I don't think, because he never coached under Bill Belichick. He only played, right, under Bill Belichick. He is by far, I would think, the most successful. I mean, you can make a case. Bill O'Brien's had a couple winning seasons, but I think Mike Vrabel is the most successful coach that has come out of the Bill Belichick system, if you will, even though he was a player. What kind of coach is he? Why does it seem like, at least from my perspective, he doesn't get talked about on the same level as, like, you know, Sean McVay, people are mesmerized by, and Kyle Shanahan, and it doesn't feel like he's top of mind when you talk about top coaches, but he's done a good job.
Yeah. You guys remember back in the day, after the strike for baseball, when they had all the commercials with Tom Glavine and Sammy Sosa and McGuire? It was like
chicks dig the long ball. Yeah.
Offense draws eyes, you know, and the Titans aren't a team that will go out and score 40 points every game. So they're not talked about as much. Mike Vrabel isn't talked about as much because he's not the young offensive genius that has the notepad and the pencil and he's always script. That's not Mike Vrabel. People don't really like the defensive side of things as much as they like seeing that scoreboard get rung up. I think when you look at Mike Vrabel and you ask what type of coach he is, he's a player's coach. And the thing is, in watching him, he does a really good job of making sure the guys understand that balance. Where he's like, I'm your homie. I care about your family. I care about, the things that are happening off the field. But you got to remember, when it's time to play ball, it's what I say. That's what goes. And I think that's the relationship that he has. And then just the fact that I know a lot of people don't like to, hear this, but there's just a different advantage that you have when you've played the game, right? It's a lot easier for him to understand, okay, you know what, Clowney, I get it, man. You were in this situation. You were leaning this way, and he's leaning on you, and it's harder to do this, or this. He has been through that before, so he could explain that. And then if you watch him at practice, this is another thing that really stands out. I always watch him at practice, and you'll see him go to the wide receivers, drop a jewel there, go to the offensive line, give them a nugget on pass blocking, and then the corners, and say, hey, you know what? You got to make sure that you're getting your depth and your drop. It's really remarkable watching him. Then he'll go over to Derrick Henry, and they have the helmet on the stick, and he's punching the ball out of Henry's hands, trying to, and Henry is using the stiff arm to stiff arm the helmet on the stick. It's just there's so much about him that makes him a good coach, and as a former player, like I didn't play in the league, I played in college, but I'm watching him and I'm like, man, like this is a dude that I would love to play ball for. And then you just look at some of the other things as far as like the stuff that they do in practice. Jeffrey Simmons had a tip pass that Harold Landry picked off, and it ended up being an interception, and that sealed the game. Well, guess what they were doing in practice that week? The defensive linemen are coming off the ball, right, and they're engaging, and then they're lifting their hands up with the outside linebacker coach throwing a kickball. They're practicing that. So those are the things that really stand out. The stuff, the techniques that they teach in practice transfer to the games, and they have impact. So I think, Mike Vrabel, I endorse him as a solid coach. I remain objective, but I definitely feel like he's an outstanding coach. And if I was playing, I would love to play football for that guy.
Can Tajae Sharpe play? Because I think in 2 weeks we've seen, since he obviously went from the Titans and signed with the Vikes in March, I think we've seen 1 4th and 3 deep ball directed his way, which was probably blatantly unfair to expect him to catch that ball. That being said, though, serious question: can he contribute?
Man, you gotta leave my guy Tajae alone, man. No, he's a good player. I'll say this: when he was here with the Titans, and I'll say it with confidence, he was their best receiver along the boundary. He has really good ball control, or body control rather, and he's very sure-handed. He wasn't a heavy contributor with the Titans, but he definitely made some plays, especially on third downs, and that's kind of been his MO in the time that I've covered the Titans, since 2018. But I was looking at that yesterday. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm gonna shoot him a text, man. I ask him, what's up, man? What's going on? Because I really
let us know what he says. I'd be curious.
I really thought that he would be productive out there, to be honest with you. Now he's no Stephon Diggs, who I will take credit. He was my number 2 rated receiver in that draft, and I was covering the Ravens at the time, and I remember, like, you got this outstanding receiver right in your backyard. You're starving for receivers. Why don't you take him? But I'll say that Sharpe is no Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. Hey, last thing for you here, Turron. It's been great getting your insight. I know you're immersed in Titansville here. So from your sort of 30,000-foot perch, when you look at the Vikings, and they are very broken going into this game, and it's probably like the gateway for if the Vikings are still going to be relevant this year versus if they're going to be legitimately in the mix for a quarterback in the 2021 draft. A lot of it hinges on this game, probably. What are your just 30,000-foot thoughts on the Vikings as you look at them coming into this game?
Well, one word: disappointed. I've always kept an eye on the Vikings, even dating back to Anthony Carter, and then Chris Carter, Robert Smith, all those guys. Minnesota has always been a team that I enjoyed watching. And now, I mean, when you have the talent that you have on that team, and Dalvin Cook, who is, in my opinion, a criminally underrated running back, and you have Adam Thielen, against you like route runner, I'm confused. That's really the bottom line. And then watching the Colts game, it's just, okay, how do you let a team have the ball for 38 out of 60 minutes? And when you have a running back like Dalvin Cook, they have to stop turning the football over. That's a serious issue. They have to get the run game established because Kirk Cousins is most effective off of play action. So when I look at it, I think that's the issue. There are some injuries in the secondary. Holton Hill, coming out of Texas, I'm not sure what happened, but he's not exactly living up to what a lot of people thought he would live up to, the level of play coming out of Texas. I really, really like Cam Dantzler. I really like Jeff Gladney. I did a lot of stuff with those guys and focused on them. So it's just, there's so much talent, man. Eric Kendricks, I mean, come on. We're talking about the best cover linebacker in the league, right? And do we really have to get into the safeties? Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris, those guys are legitimate ballers. So there's so much talent on the team. It's just confusing as to why it's not going. And it's frustrating, when you see a team that's that good, but playing the way that they played.
Yep. Great stuff. Turron Davenport, ESPN.com, Titans reporter, and this segment powered by Corona Hard Seltzer on our end. So thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to the game on Sunday.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure, man. Appreciate you guys.
Great stuff from Turron there. We'll keep it here on Purple Daily, and we're going to get into the future of Mike Zimmer. And even though he signed a contract extension, and actually all the things that you hear about Mike Vrabel there, we've seen a lot of that stuff in practice with Mike Zimmer. Although he definitely leans toward dropping little jewels and nuggets on the defensive side when he's at practice.
Mm-hmm.
But real quick, before we get into the future of Mike Zimmer, courtesy of Corona Hard Seltzer, they are putting together for us and for you guys, the listeners and the viewers of Purple Daily, the ultimate home tailgate party package. It's a giveaway. It's a few of our partners here on Purple Daily that are putting together some great stuff, and someone's going to win this 65-inch TCL TV with a soundbar, $200 worth of Grunhofer's meats, $100 to MGM Wine and Spirits, and you can enter in one of two ways. Just go to scorenorth.com, SKOR North.com, and click on rewards, and you'll see it right there. You can sign up and you can have your chance to win, or you can download the Score North app, which is free to download in the Apple and Google Play stores. You can find all of our podcasts across the Score North network, Judd's written pieces about the Vikings, and you just have to register your name and your email and enter through listener rewards. So pretty cool giveaway from some of our partners here on Purple Daily. Mike Zimmer. Let's just go there for a second here.
You want to rip the Band-Aid off?
Two-part question.
Yeah.
Should his job be in jeopardy at some point this season?
Mm-hmm.
It's an 0-2 start. It's not an 0-6 start yet. So there's definitely still time to turn this thing around.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are both skeptical, but should his job be in jeopardy at some point this season, even though he signed a contract extension?
Mm-hmm.
And what would cause you to decide to fire him during the season if it came down to that?
So I think both. The question to me, let's combine them because I can answer the questions if you actually put them together. And one, to be clear, I do not think the Wilfs are going to fire him or Spielman in season under any circumstance. Okay. So they could win one game. I don't think, but that being said, let's hypothetically combine the questions that you just asked me. And I think the way his job should be in jeopardy is after a sit down in which you say, we're going to have to play who we play, which means we're going to have to play our young guys. We're going to take our lumps. So they might improve. We don't know, but we don't know. So they might, if they don't improve, we're just screwed. And if Mike says no, and Mike starts to do his own thing, and Mike starts to try, and let's say he tries to milk 5 or 6 wins, which to me is just useless, completely useless. That to me, because the thing that got Childress fired in 2010, and the only reason why I would fire Zimmer during the course of 2020 is insubordination. So, and in Brad's case, he cut Moss, Phil, based on the fact that he had full control of the 53. Now, unfortunately for him, he didn't think to call the people that own the team to say, I'm going to cut Randy Moss. Big mistake.
He also,
but he could do that. Mike, to be clear, Mike can't do that. Spielman's got control.
Yeah.
So if Mike said, so-and-so, I can't stand him, he would have to go to Rick to get approval, and Rick would say, we don't want to get fired.
Is it also fair to say that, like, obviously Mike Zimmer can be surly and crusty and old school and all those things, but I think Mike Zimmer is a little bit more likable behind the scenes, and Mike Zimmer seems to be liked more by the Wilfs than Childress was by the Wilfs. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that's probably fair. And I
Childress wasn't a great people person.
No, and I also think that but I mean, the thing that Brad did not have, and the reason why I don't like the coach to be in charge of the 53-man roster, is I want checks and balances. So if Mike did just go crazy, just absolutely flipped out, he still couldn't pull the trigger that Brad did. But the only way that I think that Mike Zimmer's job in 2020 would be in jeopardy is if he was actually insubordinate as to what he was asked to do.
Yeah.
I don't think his job is in jeopardy. Now, the third part of the question and the spinoff, and it doesn't so much involve what's going to transpire this season, is this the right direction for the team, period, in an offensive league now? And that's sort of a separate, but no, I don't think that there is something that gets Mike fired unless he does something that we completely don't expect that they deem to be an insubordinate act.
Yeah. I don't think his job should be in jeopardy in 2020. I don't think I agree with what you're saying in terms of if he does something that's just crazy insubordinate behind the scenes, and I don't foresee that happening. He's a pro. And he's had a good career. Like, it's a terrible start. And I know that we have been driving the bus on, hey, this is probably a good season to just take a step back and maybe go get a quarterback in this historic great quarterback draft. But that doesn't take away from, no, Mike Zimmer hasn't won a Super Bowl, and that's the goal. That's what this franchise's goal should be on an annual basis. But he's kind of in that second tier when you look at like winning percentage and record over the 7 years. He's not Bill Belichick. I wouldn't put him in the Sean Payton group or anything like that. There's like 6 or 7 coaches that have won a Super Bowl that are definitely going to be above him. He's not Andy Reid, but he's a really good head coach, and his winning percentage is something around 60% or something.
Yeah.
And he has won a couple playoff games. Well, let me take that back. He beat the Saints in the playoffs, should have beat the Seahawks in the playoffs, and then they had the Minneapolis Miracle.
He beat the Saints twice.
So he's beat the Saints twice in the playoffs.
Yeah, you know.
So it's a very Denny Green like run where Denny Green was here for basically a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Good coach, no train wreck seasons until the very end. Mike Zimmer is going down a very similar path, and the question is there another level to his game as a coach? And it's going to be tough for him to turn this thing around. What I like about the Vikings historically, for the most part, is they aren't a Cleveland Browns coaching carousel team. Like, yes, they have pulled the trigger midseason before with Brad Childress, and I think they admitted a mistake after 3.5 years of Leslie Frazier. But for the most part, you get 4 years or so, maybe 5. Sometimes in the case of Denny Green, you get a decade.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just going to get 1 year and fired or 2 years and fired. Like, I think there's something to be said about the perception of the Vikings being a stable franchise for the most part over the last 10 or 15 years, and firing a coach mid-season would show the rest of football, oh, whoa, okay, stability is off here. So I think anything you can do, worst case scenario, anything you can do to at least get through the season, and then if you have to evaluate a coaching change, do it in the offseason. Don't be one of these franchises that just like, oh, we need a jolt in week 6, and so we're gonna fire somebody.
And what does an in-season change do you? Like, what's the point? So if you're bad, you're bad. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Embrace that. But if you're a good franchise and you make an in-season change, it's done to provide a spark. It's done because the coach has so worn out his welcome at that point that he is let go. So I guess my question would be, if we put all the pieces together and say, what would be the incentive to fire Zimmer in season? There really is none. Now, that does not mean that you wouldn't get to March and be like, well, hold on a second. This team was terrible. The league is trending or has gone offense, so it's time to make a change. That would all be a reasonable conversation. But unless you're just an absolutely crappy franchise, the reasons for making in-season changes are for a reason.
Yeah,
there's not a justifiable one here, I don't think. So you know, let's say you fire Mike and Coobs is like, I'll take the job, but just for the rest of 2020. And Coobs comes in and he wins, like, let's say 3 games because the team gets that typical jolt. Well, that's not a positive. You just won 3 games. Right.
Yeah,
who cares?
Yeah. And again, it's funny because the only reason why you would really look to provide that midseason jolt in the NHL, this happens on a more regular basis, is if you think your team can win a championship, right? Sure. But in football, if you're to the point where you have to fire a coach in like week 6 or 7, it probably means you're like 2-5 or something. You're not winning a Super Bowl. So it's usually the sign of unstable franchises that, oh, we got to do something. We don't have any answers, and so we're going to just like bring someone in the middle of the season. Like,
you mean like the Lions?
Yes. Yeah.
Who are almost certain to fire Patricia at some point in 2020?
Don't be that franchise.
I agree with you.
And I would add to that, another question to be posed here is that oftentimes in the NFL, even with reasonable franchises that wait until the end of the year and then evaluate, take a step back, take a deep breath.
Yep.
Oftentimes coaches are just gauged off of like the linear progression or lack thereof of a team's wins and losses, right? So like Brad Childress is kind of a good example. And you and I, like, I'm not saying that Brad Childress was like screwed or anything, but okay, you start off and you're 6-10, and then you're 8-8. Okay, you're taking steps forward, and then you get to an NFC Championship game, and then like the minute you take a step back, got to make a change.
Right,
got to make a change. Now that's a different example,
right? But they did it for a reason.
Yep. But that's kind of how it goes in the NFL, where it's like, all right, you get your 4, 5, 6 years, and you're going up, and then the minute you hit a plateau or take a step back, it's like, got to fire the guy.
I will say this: the balancing act there that I will give teams that make the move the benefit of the doubt on a little bit too is this is a shelf life league though. So like your judgment has to be, unless the guy's name is Belichick but for the most part, this is a league where you have a set amount of time. Now, often there's too much impatience, but there are times where you just say the message has run out.
And so that's my question about Zimmer. Because when you say that it's the message runs out, I think sometimes front offices and fans just assume that the message has run out, where maybe the answer is, oh, the roster's not good enough, or they whiffed on a couple draft picks or something, or this team in particular, the message has run out. But if you swap this guy and this guy out, you extract 2 guys, the message clicks. Is Mike Zimmer the type of guy, from what you've seen in 6 or 7 years, that let's say the Vikings go 5-11 or something, like they just take a step back? Has he earned enough? Does he deserve the chance to hop back on the ride and ride it back up again? Or would you deem a 5-11 season to be just like the end of the Mike Zimmer? It's been a good run. It's just time to move on at that point.
So I think the hot take would be here: fire him now. I think the honest answer to your question is if your coach, who is respected as much as I think as Mike is by the Wilfs, I think it's a conversation. And I think part of the conversation goes like this: are you burned out here? Because he might say yes. And that does not mean that he won't go get another job, that'll be a fresh start and be successful. And we'll all be like, Zim did it with, take your pick. But I think if you're going to do this in a rational, really well-constructed way, it's not, I've decided your message is done here. It's a conversation in which you say, it seems like this. What do you think? And do you think that your time here in some ways has run its course?
Yeah. And I agree. I do think he has done enough in 6 years to not just be treated like crap mid-season or at the end of the season. And I think it's worth the conversation too. Age probably comes into play too. Like for him, I mean, maybe burnout is a thing. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But like when you're in your 60s and you've had some health issues and the eye thing, like, it's a conversation. But I don't like the idea of just continuing on this path of, well, as soon as you have a down season, you're just fired. Well, now, would I be curious to see one of these whiz kid, younger, offensive-minded guys come in and draft the quarterback that they want and see how that tandem plays out? Like maybe you're seeing in Arizona right now, or in Los Angeles with the Rams and Sean McVay and Jared Goff. Like that definitely piques my interest. Get a dude at quarterback and get a brilliant offensive mind and see what those guys can do together. But we're still a ways away from that. I know we've speculated on that a lot this week, and that will continue to be a discussion. It'll probably be even more discussion in a month if they lose like 3 out of their next 4 with a tough schedule. But as of right now, Mike Zimmer still deserves the respect of everything he's earned in the first 6 years, in my opinion. So
I think that's very fair.
We'll We'll see. It's been, let's see here. The Vikings have not allowed more than 350 points in a season since Leslie Frazier's last year, when they allowed 480 and he got
shocking.
Fired. And they've allowed an average of 35 in the first 2 games combined. So,
and they might not have Hughes, who I guess has a neck problem now. And keep in mind, he missed the playoffs last year because of a broken vertebrae. They probably won't have Cam Dantzler, which means Chris Boyd is going to bump up. So your starting cornerbacks, your 3 cornerbacks on Sunday will be Holton Hill, Chris Boyd, and Jeff Gladney.
Ooh, boy. And Ryan Tannehill, I agree with Turron. Ryan Tannehill has turned a corner.
Well,
that dude looks like a different quarterback.
Again, I will urge you to think of it this way. Football's nature is taking its course in Minnesota. Allow what's going to happen to happen. Don't fight it.
Fail for Fields.
Don't fight it. Allow it to happen. Your only long-term problem is going to be the more they lose and the pressure lessens, the more statistics your quarterback is going to put up.
Missed tackles for Morgan.
You know what? I'm on the. Can we start with Fields and Lawrence?
Yes.
Like, I mean, God bless.
100%.
Morgan's a great story, but let's start at the top this time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So I don't know if I'm at the point where I'm just like full on actively rooting for train wrecks here, because sometimes you need a good train wreck to really take that step forward. But ask me again on Ventline, cheap plug, after this Titans Vikings game is over on Sunday. You can find Vikings Ventline immediately after Vikings games on Score North, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.com/Purple Daily Podcast, where we welcome fans into the video with us. And that's been a blast the last couple weeks, even though it's just been disaster football. So hang out with us on Sunday after Vikings and Titans is over. That's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zolgad, Declan Goff pushing the buttons, and a thanks to Turron Davenport from ESPN.com for giving us the lowdown on the Vikings Week 3 opponent, Tennessee. We'll see you next time.